Okay, this is part 2 on a short series of flows and beyond. So let's take a look at this particular offense here. Outbound transfer of sensitive data. Well, how do I know communication to the command and control? Well, that, there's some thing containing HTTP web traffic. What is this all about? Well, I have the advantage of having advisor, which first of all is telling me this is big deal. And when we look at the graph, we see that there are other offenses, particularly we're going to look at 25 and 26 that came right after. And it's telling me that somebody went to this malicious IP, and that's the Emonet or Emonet, I don't know what you call that, and all these organizations, threat organizations behind it. Okay, let's actually go back to the offense and see how did it was able to come up with all this information. Notice that there are some events and flows as well. So first, let's look at the flows. There are 4 flows here. We can click on any one. Let's see, this with the red dot indicates that these particularly ones contributed to the offense. And these are the fields that I was referring about. These are the IPv fields that were extracted from the payload. Notice that things like DNS, request and response, content subject, recipient user, all this is data that is inside the payload. File size and file hash, this is something that the tool computes. You're not going to get this in the, not even in the payload itself, but you can actually extract the file, get the size and compute the file hash. And all these you're going to be seeing more on that in this video series, suspect content later. That is actually very important. But all these are fields. And by the way, there are more, and you can actually extend all these. But notice that it was able to grab things from that particular field. And this entity alert, this basically is indicating, is the main indication that there was something suspicious found in there. Notice that there is an Excel. So, and QNI understand the format of all these files. So, this customer spreadsheet that contains data. Notice that there are also file hashes. I mean, these are all the extra intelligence that now QRadar can fire upon because it's been extracted from the payload. Let us look at another offenses and another things that QNI can do. Let's look at these 31 and 32 offense. Let's look at the first one. So an IP from Brazil. Let's take a look at the flow. What's actually inside this flow? And again, we should see here all these fields extracted by QNI. And here in the suspect content, the inspector, the decappers of the QNI tool found a suspicious redirect. And there's a little additional data. There's something in Spanish here, entrega de boleto, urgente. What else can we, we know something suspicious is in there, but how can we get more details about it? Let's actually go to the other offense, the 32 one. And actually, there's a lot of malware that has been found related to this. Let's actually see what advisor has to do to tell us about it. Boy, there's plenty of blue here, plenty of IOCs and relationship to other offenses and all that good stuff. These are the assets. This is the IP address of the guy. This is probably the mail server. Let's actually go back to the offense and see the events that are in here. And well, this is actually very important. File hash observed by malware threat from PhishMe. Because of the field, you saw that in one of the fields that the IPv flux extract from QNI is the file hash. And I have actually a feed from phishme.com with threat intelligence about stuff that is hashes particular URLs and IPs that are related to phishing campaigns. And no wonder this rule trigger. I wasn't expecting that one to fire on this one. These are Philip Shepard's rule, and he's been looking at things like high-risk content, and this is exploiting the inspectors that are in QNI. Detected the an executable file being transferred, file extension, IRC connections. Very interesting. Let's actually look at the flows. 289 flows. We can actually, let me look at this particular port. I can actually right click in it and filter only on that port. Let me look for data being transferred, source byte. Let me actually sort this by amount of traffic. Let's actually inspect this flow here. We see some, this was analyzed by the QNI inspectors. Let's look at the payload. And we see here clearly this doesn't look particularly good looking upon your host name. I mean, there's some scanning, some inspection actually going on here. In the first video, I show how you can detect in the asset database server based on port. But what about services that you cannot determine based on a port? Because they say that they all use, port 80 or whatever. Well, with QNI, there's a capability of detecting some particular services that are detected in a machine. When something gets installed on the machine and uses a common port, and it can detect that by virtue of the actual content. And we can see these particular events that were fired here. New server discovered on an existing host. Example. Another example here is SSH or Telnet detected in a non-standard port. Well, how do we know the details of this one? Well, if we look into the flows, there's only one flow here. We can see that this is using OpenSSH, which is good, but these are not the port. It should be 22, not 9022. Is this something malicious, or is an app that particularly behaves that way? You will need to investigate that in your network, but certainly it's something that is not standard. So, and typically things that are abnormal are commingle with some attacks. All the things that you can detect are spam, certificate expire, anonymous proxies, scanning IP, sweeping of the network, weak public keys being used, botnet, file encryption, file entropy. I mean, all those things are in the capabilities of the actual tool. Particularly Jara rules can be extremely helpful. I mean, I think I may have some examples in here. Let me go into my rules and say here, search here for Jara. And I have 3 examples in here. We can actually look at the ones from, from Philip here. Again, I have no knowledge on Jara or what it can do, but I never play with it. But certainly something that is being used to detect type of malware, type of attacks, and information that is within the actual payload. But all this is based on the premise that, hey, you are able to see the payload because it is not encrypted. But most people these days use SSL. What can you do about it? And we're going to cover that in the next video of this short series.